Heidi Thurston, everybody.
Thank you. Okay. Is my mic on? Okay. We didn't do a mic check. I am a theater teacher, so mic checks are important, and I thought, oh my gosh, we didn't do a mic check. Great. I'm so glad to be here. Good morning. A little bit about me. My name is Heidi. I'm a theater teacher to high schoolers and junior hires. I am married to Caleb. I have 3 daughters, Alice, Elizabeth, and Laura. I love them greatly. I was born in Reno, Nevada, if you need to know that. A little fact about me. I was homeschooled until high school. I'm one of 5 kids. My twin and I are the last of the bunch. And before you think there's somebody out there walking around that looks exactly like me, you would be wrong. We are fraternal twins, which means we look very different. We are very different. I was raised in a very sheltered bubble, homeschooling with only my siblings as my classmates. As I grew, I soon realized that I was learning differently than my siblings. I wasn't meeting the benchmarks that I should have. At first, my parents thought, oh, maybe she can't see, because I wasn't learning my alphabet, or I wasn't reading. I was way behind where I should have been. And so I got glasses, and much to my chagrin, I had to wear them. I hated them. They were the big 90s glasses. Hated wearing those. And time passed, but I didn't progress, even with glasses. And so my parents invested in something called Hooked on Phonics. If you remember the ad from the 90s, it was this cute ad of kids reading books. And then at the very end, they would all get up and say, Hooked on Phonics worked for me. Hooked on Phonics did not work for me, unfortunately. It soon became apparent that I wasn't learning at the pace that I should have. It wasn't until college that I made an appointment. I went to George Fox, and they had a doctor of psychology department. And I made an appointment. I went in, I got tested, and I got diagnosed with dyslexia and processing deficit disorder, which means I don't process information. I don't store it the same as other people. You can imagine not being diagnosed until college, that learning became really difficult for me. I really struggled with low self-esteem. I struggled at feeling, when I did go to public high school, I always felt like an outsider. I felt like I just couldn't ever quite keep up with my classmates. And I just felt honestly stupid. My twin sister and my brother right above were very smart, and they would excel, and they could do things so quick, and I would always take twice as long, if not longer, at homework. I just never felt a part. One of the things that I did realize is that I loved learning through stories. I fell in love with stories, especially when they were read like in a TV show. My favorites were Wishbone. If you remember Wishbone, it was a little dog. If you don't know it, it's a little dog. And they would read these literature stories, but the dog would be the main character. It was very bizarre, but it was so fascinating because I had a hard time reading these stories, but it was acted out before me, and I would get so invested in these stories. Another one was the classic Reading Rainbow. I loved reading Rainbow because I would get to see these stories that my siblings would read very quickly, but I would see them acted out before me and read to me. One of the stories that I fell in love with was The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Loved the story of Quasimodo. If you don't know it, Quasimodo is a deformed man who gets adopted and then put into the Notre Dame to ring the bells. He gets kind of sequestered from society. And I loved this idea of this character who was an outsider, who had purpose and found love. Although this is the image of the Victor Hugo Quasimodo, I grew up with the Disney version that came out in the 90s. That was very lovable, and he sang great songs, which I loved singing along to. And he found love, loving Esmeralda. And I fell in love with that an outsider could be somebody important. Later on in high school, I would fall in love with another amazing story called Les Miserables, where a character, another outsider, finds purpose even through his brokenness. So today, as Matt asked me to come speak, and I had to think about somebody who influenced my faith, Victor Hugo is who I'm going to talk about today. He was the writer of Hunchback of Notre Dame and Les Miserables. Victor Hugo was born to an atheist father and a Christian mother on February 26, 1802. He was very religious and devoted to the church early in his childhood, but as he grew, he became really frustrated with the church. He walked away from organized religion, but wrote those frustrations and injustices he saw in the church into his books. He loved to explore themes of love, loss, nature, and the human condition. Hugo developed his own brand of imaginative realism in his stories, a literary style that combined realistic elements with exaggerated symbols. In this style, each character represented a significant social issue of the time. Politically concern dominated much of Hugo's writing, and he used his work to champion causes such as universal suffrage and free education. Hugo believed that the modern writer had a mission to defend the less fortunate. Though he often drew criticism for his politics, his passion for documenting injustice ultimately led to widespread praise for both his literary and social achievements. He wrote during a period of rapid social and political change. Hugo's work reflected the revolutionary spirit of the time. He was a staunch advocate for democracy, free speech, and the abolition of poverty and oppression. These ideas found expression in his writing, especially The Hunchback of Notre Dame and Les Mis, his famous works. He was a soul who was looking and searching for the divine. Although we don't know where he ended in his faith still came through his writing. A modern Christian author critically wrote about him, "We have little hope that his spiritual pilgrimage led him to Christ and heaven, but in the providence of God and by the grace he scattered so liberally among the adversaries, Hugo was brilliant in his blindness. The Imago Dei and the remnants of his Christian roots broke forth to praise his maker." So he's not maybe somebody we would think of as being this grand father of our faith, but he impacted me. The Hunchback and Les Mis, both stories featuring the nobody. Although Hugo is not most outstanding role model for our Christian faith, he knew how to depict the human condition that we all have to deal with on a daily basis. This is most highlighted in his journey of Jean Valjean and Les Mis. If you don't know the story of Les Mis, this Jean Valjean, we open and we get to know him as he's in prison. He broke, when he was young, he broke a window pane and stole a loaf of bread because he was poor. He gets caught, he gets put in prison, and he has to serve 20 years for that theft. We get to know him as he's getting released from prison after those 20 years. He doesn't have any money, any support, anything. He's released. So a bishop finds compassion on Jean Valjean, brings him in for a meal, lets him stay the night, and Jean Valjean, in his desperation, steals from the bishop. He takes coins, and then he runs away, but he gets caught. And the officers bring him back to the bishop, and they expect the bishop to condemn him, to say he stole from me and throw him back into prison. But instead, the bishop, instead of condemning him, says, "I gave him those coins. And in fact, not only did I give him those coins, but there were candlesticks that he didn't take." And so he gives Jean Valjean the candlesticks. And he tells the officers, he's not in the wrong, please go, leave him be. And then he tells Jean Valjean, go choose something else. Go do better. I'm giving you this so that your life can be transformed. So Jean Valjean goes throughout the rest rest of the story, we see that he becomes a leader in the society, that he changes his ways. He adopts an orphan named Cosette. He changes so many lives through this story. Because of the love that he was shown, he changes the lives. And he has to see the French Revolution as it goes around him, and he sees Cosette into adulthood, and she falls in love, because what's a good story without a romance? And then as he is dying on his deathbed, he looks at Cosette, and he says some of my favorite words ever written. He says, "To love another person is to see the face of God." This idea that Jean Valjean was an outsider, a prisoner, a social outcast intrigued me in high school. In no way can I see my life as this character. I was never in prison. But that his humanity, his brokenness, and the grace that was given, and then the redemptive story he went on, radically changed my faith. From an early age, to see that somebody that was an outcast could affect other people was empowering to me. I saw that the brokenness wasn't the end story, but that the image of God and him changed everything. Matt talked last week, if you weren't here, about finding the imago Dei in each other, going and finding the imago Dei. If you're like me, you might have left and said, I don't really know what imago Dei means. And so I Googled it. I went home, and this is the Google definition of imago Dei. Imago Dei is a foundational Christian doctrine stating that humans are created in God's likeness. Originated in Genesis 1:27, it is designed as a unique spiritual, moral, and rational connection between humanity and God, setting humans apart from other creation and establishing the basis of humanity's dignity, equality, and the purposeful stewardship of the world. I crave that. I've always craved that, to have part of me set apart. But I discredit myself often, telling myself that I'm not good enough, hearing those voices as I grew up in school, feeling like an outsider, feeling stupid, feeling like I couldn't catch up. But that brokenness isn't the end story. In 2 Corinthians 3, we read, and again, it's hard for me to read out loud, so bear with me as I read. Now, if the ministry of death, chiseled and letters on stone tablets, come in glory, so that the people of Israel could not gaze at Moses' face because of the glory of his face, a glory now set aside, how much more will the ministry of the Spirit come in glory? For if there was glory in the ministry of condemnation, much more does the ministry of justification abound in glory. Indeed, what once had glory has lost its glory because of the greater glory. For if what is set aside came through glory, which much more has the permanent come in glory. Since then, we have such hope, we act with great boldness, not like Moses, who put a veil over his face to keep the people of Israel from gazing at the end of the glory that has been set aside. But their minds were hardened. Indeed, to this very day, when they hear the reading of the Old Covenant, the same veil is set there, since only in Christ is it set aside. Indeed, see my dyslexia. Now the Lord is a spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of God as through reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this is coming from the Lord, the Spirit. We are being transformed into the likeness of Christ. We are being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory. From the start to finish, we believers are being transformed by God's glory, for God's glory, into the image of God's glory. One of the struggles we can have is letting others see the imago Dei in us. For some, it's easier to go and see the imago Dei and the people around us. It's easier to call it out, to say, oh, that's so beautiful, or oh, I love that part of you. I see God's glory in you. And it's much harder to see it in ourselves. If someone has harmed the Imago Dei in you, I'm sorry. If no one has said that to you, I'm sorry. Because they can. And I've experienced that. When I think, oh, this is the image of God in me, and someone has said it's not enough, or it's not beautiful, or their perspective of it isn't the same as mine, and it hurts. But you are beautiful. You bear the image of God. You shine with the glory of God. No scars, no choices, no disformity like Quasimodo can keep you from the Imago Dei. If you feel wounded, which we all do, we all have our wounds, again, I'm sorry. I have wounds that nobody said I'm sorry to. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. But also, this is a sign you have lived your life, that you are human. Victor Hugo didn't shy away from writing the depth, pain, and injustice of humanity. The beauty of his writing isn't the happy ending or the redemptive qualities of his characters, but it is that he wrote the human condition. I urge you to think of an area of your life you feel like is beyond the image of God. The thing that feels too broken, too angry, too hurt, too disformed, forgotten, lonely, or rejected. The part that you think, if only they knew about this, then would it disqualify me? Can you see the Imago Dei there? What if you look in a mirror and really saw that thing, whether external, in our bodies, which is hard to see sometimes, we disqualified ourselves, or internal, thoughts, scars, wounds, choices. Can you imagine that thing having the Imago Dei? Even if the pain is of bad choices we've made, can we believe that God will transform that into his image? And then what if that thing could actually bless somebody else? Because they would see the glory of God in it, in you. I used to be really insecure about my dyslexia. That would mean people would see me as stupid or not enough, that I wouldn't be like special. But now I love talking about it. And I actually really love that part of me because it shows that I'm created by a creative God, that I get to be different. And in talking about my dyslexia and my learning disabilities, other people open up, and I often get people talking to me, oh, I think differently too. And that has led to hardship in my education or my path. I love that God made me this way. And my dyslexia gets to be a part of my Imago Dei. So my question to you is, what's yours? I'm going to pray. Lord, I just thank you for your Imago Dei, your glory, your image that gets to be in each of us, that we get to shine your glory even when it's hard. I pray that as we go home today, we get to see your image in us, the areas that we disqualify, and that we see you in that space. Thank you for this opportunity to share a bit of my story. In your name, amen. Matt's going to come do questions.